offered by the Russian president. You don't know what Vladimir Putin it. So I think Golden will have a serious talk with me after this. But anyway, on a serious note though, welcome back. And as Adil mentioned, India has emerged as the third largest startup ecosystem globally, with over 69,000 DPI recognized startups across 647 districts. The Atmanirbhar campaign focuses on self-reliance through policies that lead to global competitiveness and improve India's supremacy as part of the world economy. This panel will now focus on the potential of startups based in Bharath in contributing to and rewriting India's growth story. So please join me in welcoming our panelists, our very own Dr. Desh, co-founder, Deshpande Foundation; Sudhir Sethi, founder, chairman, and managing director, Chirate Ventures, who will be joining us online; Dr. Ashok Shettar, Vice Chancellor, KLE Tech University; and Kanika Radhakrishnan, co-chair, Thai Women Global. A warm welcome to also our moderator, Mr. Rajiv Prakash, board member of Deshpande Startups. So thank you folks, thank you for joining us. Please take it forward.
Well, good afternoon, and now that you are completely refreshed post a tea break, okay, I hope this panel serves the purpose of even additional refreshments. We have around 45 minutes, and because it's a dialogue, we're trying to kind of keep it as interactive as we can. So the topic that we are discussing today is about startups and Atmanirbhar Bharat. This is a topic which is going to operate at the intersection of three key things. First is the startup revolution, which has taken off in the last 15 years in India. Second is the government's idea and philosophy, okay, around Atmanirbhar Bharat. But Atmanirbhar as a term goes beyond government philosophy. We'll talk a little bit about it. And at the intersection of all of it is Bharat, okay, as a region. Now, in the last 15 years especially, I think startups have taken up in a big way. I think numerous statistics have been mentioned from a funding point of view, unicorn, employment, etc. And I think in the last 30 years of liberalization, which is post-1990, every 5 years a new sector took off. Financial services, telecom, IT, ITS, and each time a new sector took off, it significantly transformed the economy, created huge employment opportunities, huge entrepreneurship opportunities. But there's something significantly different about startups. Startups is not a sector. Startups is a new way of doing business. It's a new model. So today, startups as a model exists close to across 60 industries in India, which means it's that kind of a transformative effect. And it has been a very significant tier one city kind of phenomenon. We are going to explore, can it go beyond that? Today, in terms of startups, close to 200 million people consume products, okay, which are being sold by startups, content which is being distributed by startups. That's the amount of penetration that we have seen at a consumer level. Coming to Atmanirbhar, the entire concept of Atmanirbhar primarily being one of self-sufficiency and independence. At a government level, there have been important themes, especially post-COVID, of vocal for local, okay, wherein it's not about just something from because we want to create tariff barriers, but world-class products, okay, which are made in India and consumed proudly in India. And then use the power of a billion market to then create markets, go from local to global, with the second part. The third part of Atmanirbhar is Make in India for the world, which is the entire concept post-COVID of China plus one, right? And the plus one is what we are competing for. Apart from that, is the entire export of platforms out of India, Aadhaar platforms, UPI platforms, wherein we can make other countries Atmanirbhar. I mean, post the Russian war, we can see how quickly global platforms can be switched off. So the need for having more platforms of your own, that's an important element over there. Converging in all of this is where Bharat comes in. Now, what do we understand by Bharat? I mean, our idea of a Bharat for the purpose of this panel, okay, is basically tier 3 cities. I mean, if you take Hubli in that mode, and Nizamabad, and Raichur, and Davangere, Belgavi, many of those places, okay. The second part is to also go beyond these tier 3 cities, looking at taluks, but that's where the new cities are coming in, and also rural, because entrepreneurship can come from anywhere. If these were to be a country, the total population of Bharat is 800 million. If this was a country, it will be the world's second largest country. And so far, we looked at Bharat largely from a consumption point of view. The concept of Bharat is one which only as a market. We want to explore in this panel whether Bharat, do you view only as a market, or Bharat can be a creative force where entrepreneurs can come up and not only micro entrepreneurs. So without much ado, I think we have a fantastic panel over here representing the cross-section, okay, of academia, entrepreneurship, ecosystem development, inclusion of entrepreneurship, okay, and a variety of other ways. And of course, okay, not to forget Sudhir, who kind of represents venture capital, and has also renamed his company, okay, as Chirate, which I think gives us a certain amount of pride in Karnataka. So I think the first point of exploration, and to start with you, Desh, is, Desh, you built up the entire, I think you seeded the idea of a startup ecosystem for Bharath almost like 6 years ago on the back of it. And you yourself have often said you've been the beneficiary of an ecosystem. But for you to be a beneficiary, you had to go from here to Madras, and from Madras, you had to go all the way to Boston. So you're bringing Boston over here. So if we start looking at our learnings of the last 5-6 years, okay, what you see today is the kind of forcing condition for entrepreneurship in Bharat. Why has it become so relevant? And why do you feel that people need to start up? And you really see, is there a potential for entrepreneurs to emerge from Bharat? Or is it still very much a tier 1 phenomenon? So your perspectives on that,
yeah.
please.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Sudhir, for joining us. You know, part of the reason why Sudhir is not here is because he has taken such a responsible decision. He wanted to come here, but everybody in his office has COVID. So he's isolating himself and making sure that he doesn't bring it to Hubli. We need a lot of things from Bangalore, but not COVID. So thank you, Sudhir.
Thank you, Desh. I'm sorry I couldn't be there, but pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So, you know, I think it's for entrepreneurs to flourish, you need two things. You need a market, you need people who are ready to consume what the entrepreneurs produce, and you need entrepreneurs, right? And both of those things are beginning to happen. And I think in the last 5, 10, 15 years, you're seeing a lot of it. You know, people in rural India, in tier 2 cities, they all want to use modern technology, use better investment, use a shared economy, all the things that you see happening in big cities, they all have relevance and applications in these markets, right? But at the same time, you need entrepreneurs. So we didn't have entrepreneurs who were confident enough. But in the last 5 years, you see that people are coming up. And like Shashi, you know, he's built quite a good company, but his question was, hey, I always feel like I'm missing something. What am I missing, right? And, you know, in some ways, the biggest companies are always built by people who are not mainstream guys. You know, if you look at Bill Gates or Zuckerberg or any of these, they're all dropouts. I mean, they're not the guys who you think could be successful in their companies. So I'm very hopeful, like as the wish of Prahlad Joshi, that we will have some big breakthroughs coming out of here, because people, out-of-box thinking is very common to them. You know, you always need a little bit of that naivete. You probably need a lot more of confidence that they're second to none. And I think that confidence will, it's just like trust. It takes time to build. And you need role models, you need proofs. And it's always like, hey, if you can do it, I can do it too, you know? So I think it's all beginning to happen. And so Bharat is not just a marketplace. It's been a marketplace for foreign companies, you know, particularly the high technology stuff that we import. It's almost like $400 billion. It almost rivals the oil in terms of the imports that we do. And we don't need to do that. And so I think there is a huge opportunity, but also there'll be lots of new markets and new products like you're seeing in this place come up that the foreigners can never think of, because it's all local context and so on. So it's a huge opportunity, entrepreneurs with confidence, and so it's just a trend that's going to keep going, I think, for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So I see a lot of relevance to everybody assembled here to make sure that they keep that momentum going.
Thank you, Desh. I think you're bullish that this is the time when we actually going to have a lot more entrepreneurs, okay, coming from the smaller cities and potentially even rural areas. And just to kind of context that with Dr. Shetter, who's been over here, okay, and has had a vantage view of last 20 plus years of students going through your colleges. Okay, you've seen their motivations, you've seen their capabilities. How are you seeing entrepreneurship coming from Bharat? You see that now is the time for actually having a lot more of student entrepreneurs because we don't see many of them coming from smaller cities. Do you actually see entrepreneurship as a viable career option? And you might even want to get some of your alumni back into these places. So how are you looking at entrepreneurship and Atmanirbhar Bharat?
Thank you, Rajin. First of all, it is really wonderful to see almost 500 entrepreneurs from the region. I never thought at one place I can see such a number. Wonderful it is. Okay, that itself tells how the scene is changing. Okay, from last 40 years, I'm in academia. Probably 30 years back, the word entrepreneur itself was known to academia. I mean, hardly it was used in Indian academia. But last decade, the big change is happening. And academia is becoming an active partner in building the entrepreneurial ecosystem. That was not the situation. Definitely in US, that's how, or in West, that's how the entrepreneurship grew, academia being a part of the whole ecosystem. But in India, this is happening from last 10 years, I can say. But when we talk of Bharat, like we said, beyond metros, beyond sectors, that is something of a concern. Okay. I mean, what is the kind of ecosystem, entrepreneurial ecosystem, one need to have to support and grow the entrepreneurs? That is something we need to still work on. Because when you look at tier 2, tier 3 cities, you can't take just a model of a Bangalore and replicate here. The model has to be very different. And the academia need to play a big role here. That is of something of a challenge India is facing at this point of time. Still, I believe in this ecosystem, academia is missing. I mean, typically if we see 500 or 600 entrepreneurs here, how many of them are university spin-offs? Or something, the idea which has come out of their research or work? I don't think. Okay, these are the individual ideas. I mean, their passion, their hard work has led them here. But how much of academia is enabling them or enabling the ecosystem to become really impactful entrepreneurs? Very few spin-offs we are finding at this point of time. That has to change.
Right.
Okay, because the talent pipeline for entrepreneurship primarily comes from the universities, academia. I mean, that is where the fountainhead is there. There is something we need to do, I believe, going forward. There is a change, but lot to achieve.
Thank you. I think there are two key points. I mean, this thing that there's got to be a different model. So it's not just one type of model. I think that's something we can deliberate a little bit more as we go through. And the fact that we are underrepresented, okay, as far as student entrepreneurs or the academia spin-off, and I'm sure just later on can talk about ICOR and a few other things which have been going on. Now, talking about representation, and given the fact that entrepreneurship has kind of become a broad opportunity, I think one important aspect, and actually today Shravani, okay, just exemplified it, right? I mean, if there is somebody who can be, I would say, a poster child, if you don't mind, for entrepreneurship, okay, from Bharat, this entire speech that came from your heart. And Kanika, you've probably seen hundreds of great entrepreneurs, okay, who are women. And yet, I don't think we have enough women entrepreneurs. So now that we're talking about entrepreneurship from Bharat, okay, what is the opportunity space, okay, for women from Bharat in entrepreneurship? Why do they need to start up? And what really are the enabling conditions? And what's been your learnings from around the world in this area?
Thank you so much, Rajiv. And it's such a pleasure to be here. First of all, let me just commend you on all the energy you're showing because it's rubbing off on all of us. So thank you for making this time. Before I even talk about women entrepreneurs, I was just at the Mumbai Unicorn Summit this week, and they had a gala of unicorns all over, and there was talk about how 95% of the unicorns come from the big metros, and it's only 5% that are coming from the non-metros. And I was digesting this information and just examining, the history of India's, industrial background and the kind of landscape we've had. If you think about the Tatas or the Ambanis or the Adanis for that matter, they all came from non-metros. So I feel like we have the DNA, we have the right ingredients in a local ecosystem to spur and nurture innovation, and we are reaching an inflection point to really take that to its logical end. And I think at this point, out of the 69,000 startups that we have, probably 75 to 80% are from non-metros already. So it's a matter of time before we get a unicorn from here, and maybe you get a unicorn from DF. We are definitely reaching that inflection point. Having said that, any talk about Bharat, Atmanirbhar Bharat, self-reliance, whatever we call it, any conversation around that topic cannot be complete without talking about women entrepreneurs. Women constitute 50% of the Indian population. And as far as their entrepreneurial mindset is concerned, I mean, you see it every day in your wives and your sisters and mothers at home. So there is no doubt that they have that bent of mind and the spirit. Given the right kind of nurturing, they have all the ingredients to, make it happen in the real world and take their ideas to the next step. Now, where they falter or where they need support, and Shravani brought it up very beautifully, is they need to create that support system for themselves. There are external elements in the places where you're living, like an incubator, like mentors, like VC funds or angel investors, but you have to seek them out to make the most out of yourself. And right now, I know the odds are against us when we go out to raise money. Access to capital is an issue. Our innovation index is, abysmally low, but we can make the change. It's a question of us leaning in and taking that support. And one thing I want to say is, as Thai women, we run a global pitch competition. We invite applicants. Over the years, the big change that we have noticed is there are more and more applications coming in from startups and non-metros. So chapters that had 7 or 8 applications when we started in the first year are now seeing 40, 50 applications. So it's a work in progress, but we are getting there.
Thank you, Kanika. And hopefully we should actually be having many, many more women as part of that 50% which is coming from Bharath, right? We often talk about capital coming first, but in this conversation, the question to you comes at the end of this round. One of the things that some of the larger startups have been talking about for the last, let's say, 4 to 5 years is about markets moving from metro to Bharat. So clearly, the idea that Bharat is a market, is something which is well recognized by all the mainstream startups, especially those on the consumption side. But to Kanika's point, where she said 50% of startups come from smaller cities, but total amount of capital that these startups attract is only 2%. Though money goes a long way here, it's still a small percentage. Do you feel from, as a leading venture capitalist who's focused on the larger India opportunity, what is your sense about entrepreneurs from Bharat, being ready, for starting up? And do you see these kind of entrepreneurs being ready for venture capital as it exists today? And if not, to Dr. Shettar's point, what other models of venture capital ought to exist, which support this particular movement of entrepreneurship in Bharat? So if you can just provide your perspective on the opportunity and how capital is going to support this particular movement.
Okay. Well, again, thank you very much for inviting me here. I'll just maybe step back a bit. I think the way I look at it, and this learning happened during COVID much more in the last 3 years, I think there are 2 layers in the country. The first layer is the venture layer. which is very, very much talked about. And let me give you some statistic as to what is happening there and what's the fallout of that. If you look at 2007, January 1st onwards to 2020, I have the numbers, 11,500 tech startups, and I have information about tech startups only, have been funded by angels and VCs. That's it, 11,500. And the revenue of these companies in 2021 March was 20 billion. Okay. What the story I think we do not talk about and is not focused is that these 11,500 venture funded and angel funded startups, which are known, behind that is another 100,000 startups which are not funded. And by the way, many of them still run. And many of them, actually there's no data on that. I must say, we have to go to ROC and find out. But it is certainly worth finding out, but there must be at least 100,000. India is producing about 10 to 11,000 known tech startups every year right now. We received last year 3,000 startup proposals and this year about 4,000. So there's a huge amount of noise and capital which flows into tech venture investors, startups. Predominantly these are in the big areas. But what we learned here is when these companies scale up, there is a very strong forward distribution, into smaller towns and backward integration as supply chain. I'll give you an example. Today, Lenskart has about, I think, 800 to 1,000 stores. 50% are in tier 2, tier 5 towns. FirstCry has 600 stores who actually sell FirstCry products, and half of them are in tier 2, tier 3 towns. They've not reached, let's say, a town like Hooghly. Now, many of these stores, at least 60-70%, are run by entrepreneurs. They are franchises, and they manage their own businesses. Each business can be between 1 to 3 crores in their revenue per year. These are startups. I think we must realize that the layer A is creating tens of thousands of startups in the non-conventional sense. And the startup definition is not just what VCs talk about. There is a whole new smaller companies which are there, which are supporting the ecosystem. The big VC funded companies cannot become big if there's no small companies in the market space. So I just want to mention that because I think that's very, very crucial. The second part is, are we receiving entrepreneur proposals from the smaller towns? It's very, very small. There's not much. There is an ecosystem which is predominantly in the big towns. There's no question about it. In fact, 60% of our deal flow comes from the top 3 cities. What you may be surprised about is even Chennai and Hyderabad do not contribute more than 5 to 10% of the total deal flow of VC, by the way. Pune is even much less. And that the reason for that is that technology, etc., tends to form ecosystems in smaller hubs rather than bigger hubs. What will be useful is very interesting experience we had. My foundation, the City Foundation, runs a micro entrepreneurship program. And we went into a college, and suddenly during COVID times, there was a driver. Actually, he was a driver part-time. He was a student doing BCom. He and his family lost a job. They needed to survive. So he started servicing clients which he used to drive for, to service batteries because cars were parked and so on and so forth. Net, he needed about 10,000 rupees to start his own business. We gave him 10,000 rupees. And today he runs a micro company, which is 37 people in 2 years' time. His net earnings are 47,000 rupees a month, net earnings. Okay. Now his ambition is to grow. I think similar case studies are there in smaller towns we've come across. And these case studies are not funded by conventional VCs. In fact, conventional VCs have no role to play there because A, they don't know, we don't know, and B, conventional VCs run after very different pockets of investing in technology. I think the conventional wisdom is also that everything has to be a unicorn, then only it's a startup. No, that's not the case. There are tens of thousands of businesses, and it's a very important thing for us to not to drill this into our youngsters that everything has to be unicorn. If you're running a business which is 1 crore, 5 crores rupees a year, or 50 lakhs rupees a year, and I came in a little bit early to get a context. I saw the lady who had created a security company with 1,000 women. That's an amazing business. And to that extent, some of these will be funded by banks, some of these will be funded by local pools of capital, which is angels, and so on and so forth. So is there a demand from a VC point of view in the smaller towns? The answer is no. Is it the same model which we have to carry to the smaller towns? The answer is no. I think the model will be different in smaller towns, and I love what Desh has done in the smaller towns, because those needs are very different. I mean, you go to a small town, they know agriculture much better than a city guy. So is there a way to have an agri-tech small company coming up which serves the needs of people around overall? So that's my view. I think the model has to be very, very different. I just want to mention one thing, that the capital pools which are coming into the VC world, 95% are from international markets. Only 5% are from India. That itself, I'm jumping the gun. Atmanirbhar, India is not Atmanirbhar from a capital point of view on funding its own startups. And this 5% has happened after 7-8 years. China is 60%. If India does not become Atmanirbhar in capital, and by the way, family office capital in India is about $3 trillion. That's humongous. It just goes into real estate and public markets and so on and so forth. Just to give an example, the top 5 IT services companies in the last 6 years, dividends and share buybacks only by 5 companies in the last 6 years of IT services is $27 billion. Where does that go? It goes into public markets. How do we get that money out? How do we get that money through formal and means into the smaller towns is very, very crucial right now. And that will be funded by Indian capital, and in very good cases. I think Desh Foundation is a very, very crucial case, very motivational for many other people in the country. But the rupee capital has to pony up.
Sudhir, you finished or?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. So I think there are some common themes coming and converging to the point about models, right? Because there's been a certain model of creating a startup, okay, which is what has often been celebrated. And just to use a cricket analogy, I mean, there is the entire T20 spirit, okay, which then finally results in so many unicorns. And nothing wrong. I mean, you need emblems to kind of keep the thing going. But there is, I think, a place for limited overs cricket and also for test cricket. And at the same time, all cricket doesn't only have to be gully cricket, okay, where, I mean, it's not only where micro-entrepreneurship has got some value, and I think it provides lots of employment, but there are opportunities elsewhere. So since we're talking about models, is there an opportunity that places like Hubli and others can actually become a sandbox, okay, for a new kind of entrepreneurship model, or more kinds, like the one which Dr. Shettar referred to, which Sudhir referred to, where we can see, and it's existed in the past. For example, there have been clusters of manufacturing which happened. Hubli itself has been a wall manufacturing cluster. Okay, then there have been different type of supply chains. So what are those models which can harness the power of entrepreneurship from a capital point of view, okay, from a market perspective? So Desh, any thoughts from you on that front?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I think I have two perspectives. One from a perspective of the entrepreneur, another one from the perspective of the ecosystem builders. The perspective of the entrepreneur, doesn't matter how much you reduce the friction, he still has to face that risk. He still has to jump off the cliff and be willing to take that risk, even though the risk becomes less and less, because if you fail, you get to do the next one, and then the next one, and the next one, and you're valued and so on. So you can reduce the risk, but there's still that risk. So so if you're an entrepreneur, you shouldn't wait for the ecosystem. For example, in Boston, when I was starting my first company, there are only 5 or 6 entrepreneurs in all of Massachusetts. The biggest venture capital fund was maybe $10 million, right? So it was a big risky thing, but it is still a big risky thing even when you have the whole ecosystem for somebody to do it, because their friends will be getting jobs and getting paid and have a safe life and everything else. So the entrepreneur has to show commitment and conviction to bulldoze through all the issues. It doesn't matter whether it's a government issue or a ecosystem issue, capital, access to market, and so on. And we need to build models there, role models. So I'm hoping that these sandboxes will show that people can actually do it. You know, people sort of don't believe that you can do a lot of entrepreneurship from smaller places, and I think that's the role that Sandbox needs to play. Now, when you have more and more of these people come into the picture, there are ways that you can reduce the friction for them. You know, whether it's access to market or access to capital, access to mentorship, access to skills, and so on. So continuously, the ecosystem has to keep working on reducing the friction for these people. But both of these ends is an unending job. It'll go on for a long time, because if the world changes faster and faster, you'll need more and more entrepreneurs. And so the whole job market will be maybe 50 job seekers for every job maker, which means I think the world report says that we need 70 million entrepreneurs. So you need a lot of entrepreneurs, and you need a lot of ecosystems to make them successful. And so the role of the sandbox is to create models, is to first of all show success. And if you show success, then that becomes a role model for these things. And that's where I think there's a huge opportunity for all of us to collectively learn how to do that, both building the ecosystem and building entrepreneurs who are successful.
Thank you, Desh. 70 million entrepreneurs. I think there's a lot going for everyone in this room and beyond. Okay, so don't stop. The space is not running out. And the second point is role models come before the startup model. So that's like what we see in the room. Dr. Shettar, you're the one who kind of led this topic about models, right? Saying the need for an alternative model. So what would be your idea of some of the key elements of this alternative model, which probably can be tried out, okay, from places like Hubli itself?
Okay. In fact, whatever model at our university today we are able to evolve, probably Desh may not know. Okay, it is inspired by Desh's mail. Okay, around 12 years back, he sent a mail to me. Ashok, can BVB do something similar to this? To that mail, the attached file was Kaufman Foundation report of MIT, impact on Massachusetts. Okay. When I read that report, I said, impossible. I mean, MIT is a research university. I am not a researcher. I am a teaching institution. Okay. There is a big difference between us. But still, it made us to think. Then Vivek was there. Vivek was an accidental entrepreneur who entered my campus. I mean, just to strike me off. But somehow he stayed back. Okay. Already Sankalp Semiconductor had happened, but it had happened by accident, okay, not by design. Then Vivek and myself sat together looking at the mail of Desh and the Kaufman Foundation. We went on discussing how we'll make this possible. What is the model we need to evolve? Because at that point of time, 12 years back, in Hubli, this high-tech entrepreneurial movement was not existing. Okay, was non-existent. So we evolved a model wherein we say that in the first stage, because most of the educational institution, what they do, they start working on the students, run the training programs on entrepreneurship, tell them to convert their projects into business. It never happens. Believe me, it never happens. It can never happen without the proper ecosystem supporting it. So what we did, first we tried to attract serial senior entrepreneurs trying to move out of metros. We identify, create a value proposition, or create an argument which touches their, heart, get them into the campus. This is how we started. First 4-5 companies in my campus were from senior serial entrepreneurs. Now the presence of those companies in the campus started influencing the student community. And that engagement slowly started. So the campus could see around 82 startups till now. 26 of them are from my students. And this is the model which worked. Don't start with the student. First, develop that ecosystem by bringing in these people. Use them as leverage to drive the talent. Okay, now this is being replicated elsewhere also in many more campuses across India. Okay, but one thing is worrying me. Most of the startups, probably it is the experience, are there in digital world. I mean, the sector dominating is IT and services. Somehow we have failed to groom or support or bring out entrepreneurs in other sectors, mainly IT and biotech. Beyond that, how much ever we have tried, we are not able to create entrepreneurs in other sectors. That remains a challenge. That requires a different model, a kind of the whole support system need to be very different for other sectors. Because we see that in IT sector, the valuation, venture coming is pretty fast. Okay, but whereas it doesn't happen in the other sectors. Another problem still that exists in this model is venture. You see, my biggest fear is whenever my student startup or a startup succeeds in my campus, it is taken away to Bangalore. Once he gets a venture, his funder wants him to Bangalore.
Yeah, but
I lost.
From Bangalore, they're going to Singapore afterwards.
Huh? I don't know. I have to. This is my experience, and Vivek and me have broken our head over it. The best of my emerging software. No doubt, in our own standards, we have created two unicorns. I always, I don't use that 100 million. I use whoever crosses 100 crore as my unicorn. So we have created 2 unicorns in Hubli. I promise you that in next 1 or 1.5 years, I will create 2 more unicorns. Okay. But equally, I have lost some of the best startups which got the funding to Bangalore. It is continuing to happen. My question is to my fellow panelists, how we can change this.
Thank you.
This is a reality I'm talking of.
I may want to just intervene here, and I think
yes, please, Sudhir.
you are absolutely right. By the way, we face the same problem where if you take SaaS as a this thing, 60% of the entrepreneurs which have been funded in India have gone to the US. So this is a very big issue because it is driven by capital and it is driven by markets. SaaS markets are all in the US, so to that extent, those companies are going there. But with Indian capital coming in, we are able to hold back many of these entrepreneurs. The natural tendency of a technology entrepreneur to go to the best ecosystem in the world, whether it is Bangalore or Bay Area or Singapore, is there. There's no question about it. It can be held back if the markets are very local. It can be held back if the markets are very hyper local and there's local capital coming in. There is no question about it.
So I think there is an opportunity for a dual passport, okay, which can bring in the best of all the worlds. And for all you know, to your idea, we may be able to graft more entrepreneurs into the system and complete the cycle.
But it is painful. You have groomed them for 4 or 5 years. Okay, along with it, I am losing another 30 engineers working with him. 30 employment opportunities in Hubli are moving to Bangalore. It's painful.
Absolutely, sir. So let's make this one of the things that we can work with KDM about. Yeah. Just to close the loop on this one, Kanika, and from here we'll open it up to the audience. Thai Global is doing some amazing work in the area of women entrepreneurship. Is there something that you would like the audience to know as resources and ideas which we can tap into? Yeah.
Absolutely. So, staying on the topic of models, I just wanted to get in that, as far as women entrepreneurs are concerned, one fact about women entrepreneurs to note is most of the problems they seem to be solving seems to be in the social impact or environmental space, sustainability space. So that's one thing to look at, if that can be made enticing enough for the venture funds or angels to come in and invest, I think that would be a great sector. It can really uplift the state of women entrepreneurship as well. Second is, as far as creation and celebration of role models is concerned, Desh said that that's extremely important, and more so in the context of women entrepreneurship and nurturing them, because people cannot be what they cannot see. So as long as we get successful women in front of these aspiring, budding women entrepreneurs, I think that is a boost of encouragement and inspiration that they need. In addition to that, I also want to reiterate that we want to expand the funnel of angel investors that can invest in women exclusively. Unless and until that happens, data will continue to say that, well, less than 7% of the women constitute venture funds, and if there aren't enough women in the decision-making spaces, we are not going to get the venture dollars. And this vicious cycle continues. So what I would request is, and this is something for Desh and Jayashree to think about, is we talked about the Giving Pledge some years ago. Why can't we talk about something like Investing in Women Pledge, where the philanthropists of the world, the high net worth individuals of the world, think about investing in women, and not as a charity, not as a substitute for philanthropy, but really as a way to boost women's entrepreneurship and level the playing field for us. Apart from that, I think there are several other interventions we can make. Mr. Prahlad Joshi made a great point of working with the government and so on. I mean, if the Indian government really wants to make Atmanirbhar a reality, and they really want women to have their place in that ecosystem, then, direct, government work orders to these women entrepreneurs, either through, Atal Tinkering Labs or Atal Missions or what have you, will be a great spurt, because like I said, the kind of problems these women are solving are for the local ecosystem. They are not running big SaaS companies and trying to head off to Bangalore or Singapore. So they want to stay here, they want to solve the problems of the local ecosystem, and if we don't support it, we don't invest in these women entrepreneurs, that's a big opportunity wasted. Umpteen studies have shown that when you invest in a woman, she tends to spend that money on her kids' education, the family flourishes, the community moves together and forward and upwards. So we really need to take this not just as a side conversation, but make it part of the mainstream conversation, where every investment fund maybe makes a decision that 50% of their investment committee comprises of women members, so that women get their fair share. Unless and until we make things and take things so seriously at that level, I don't think things will change very easily at the ground level. So there has to be a bottom-up as well as a top-down approach. What we are doing, working with the women entrepreneurs, either as Deshpande startups or Thai women, is great, but we need a top-down approach coming from the funds and the venture investors that will really make a difference to our bottom line. Thank you.
Thank you, Kanika. That's very inspiring, and hopefully these are the sandboxes where those kind of new models can actually be tested and it happen. Now that we have got a bunch of ideas in terms of what the opportunities are for Bharat entrepreneurship and what kind of models and gaps in the ecosystems need to be filled, it'll be wonderful to have questions from the audience about whatever you may want to understand from this very illustrious panel. And over to the audience for Q&A, please. Golden, we have mics, right? Yeah.
Hello, sir. I'm Ramesh Kulkarni, founder and CEO of InfoKalash IT Services. First of all, thank you to the Deshpande Foundation and Desh sir for having such an ecosystem. So we are mainly into IT services and focusing on data engineering and data science solutions. And my question is to Desh sir and then followed by Ashok Shettar sir. The current challenge what we are facing is in terms of accessing the talent. What do I mean by that is, we are a 40 plus members now. It's a 9-month-old company. We have access to funds, but then the serious challenge is on the access to talent. If I were to produce ML engineers, there's a huge market for data science. There's huge market for data engineering. If I were to produce huge data engineers and ML engineers, I don't see anybody. First thing is, there are not many who want to join us because we're still small, and everybody, the trend is everybody wants to operate from metros. And another challenge what we have seen is, we hire so many.
Since you have limited time, can you just keep your question here, please?
Sorry for that. And our strategy has been, taking non-IT people, because there's huge demand on the IT side, non-IT people, transforming them. It takes around 9 months for us. That has been our experience to transferring them. That has been our strategy. But I'd like to understand from the panelists, how do you deal with this, which is major challenge? Just to add to this, I'm also a data director on the other side. I see the resource challenges on the other side also, where the trend is, for a startup, for anybody who is starting as a fresher, we are offering 7 lakhs.
The main thing is getting talent and the cost of talent,
exactly.
How to deal with that in a small city.
Yes.
We'll try and combine your question with the gentleman behind, so we'll try and at least start winning questions. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, thank you panelists for taking out this time and talking about what are the challenges in the ecosystem. So I'm Jasveer. I'm the founder of an agri-tech startup called SenseIt Out, and it's a business into hardware, sensors, and all. And what I've seen is that in India, if you today morning we were talking about unicorns, and I don't know how many unicorns actually hardware startups have actually become unicorns. Okay, so my question is that how can we get that ecosystem? So for example, which is there in China, Shenzhen, you have if I go there, if I want to build a hardware product there. Electronics is so easy, the things are so easily set up in a way that we can build it within a couple of days, maybe matter of weeks, and come back here. In India, it has to go through.
Your question is how to have an ecosystem for hardware startups, why it is missing?
It's very long here in India. It takes months and years and a lot of cost.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So you got 2 questions, one basically about ecosystem for hardware startups, and second is how do we deal with talent, especially for smaller cities?
Yeah. So building the ecosystem, it's a chicken and egg problem. Do you have a need? Do you have the ecosystem? And whenever you get too far ahead of any one of these things, it doesn't work. And so when the government tries to build the ecosystem, they sometimes get too far ahead of themselves. Like the ITP, whatever they built here. So they built the whole thing and there's no entrepreneurs. So I think the entrepreneurs have to come first. And when there is a need for it, that need will create new entrepreneurs who come along and build the things that these entrepreneurs need. So I would say it comes back to this entrepreneurial zeal to actually make it happen. And to some extent, in the basement here, we have enough facilities to get people going. So in terms of talent, it's the same story in 1980s when Infosys, Wipro, a lot of these guys were getting started. They had dollar revenue and Indian rupee salary, which was a big advantage, but there was no talent, right? And so they built the talent. And so number one, you don't want to compete in a business where you need the top of the top talent from Hubli, right? That's very hard to build the competitive edge. But if you look at iMerit, which works actually in video tagging, which is a pretty high-tech business, but they've broken up into a business which can be supported here. And so she's so happy that within a year, she has 200 employees working here in Hubli, and she wants to take it up to 2,000 now. So I think you also want to make sure that you leverage the strength that you can have here. The attrition rate, the kind of people, their commitment, and so on. But then you really need a business that can afford to train these people, onboard them, and everything else. So I think it's always there. It doesn't matter which startup you do, there's always something missing. You know, there's no money, there's no time, there is no people, there's no market, and you'll always be struggling. And so it's a question of really getting focused on what is the next little thing that I need to do to get moving. And you just keep climbing these stairs. And once you get big, then you'll talk about it as though it was one straight line, but it wasn't a straight line. You know, because you took the trouble to build one step at a time. So.
Sudhir has a point.
Yeah,
Yes, Doctor.
the talent problem, right from Sankalp days I am seeing, there is a reluctance of the engineering graduates to stay back in Hubli. That remains. But definitely that is something you have to overcome. First you can start with tier 3, tier 4 colleges, somehow attract them. Still there's a good talent there. And it is going to be a struggle which you have to find your problem. Coming to the next question, that's a very relevant question. That's how I have seen at least 10, 15 of my entrepreneurs disappearing. Most of the hardware startups struggle in TRL 3 to 5 level. Okay. I mean, that's where they start disappearing. I mean, the kind of bad test bed, that kind of prototyping facility, the kind of expertise that is required, they will not be able to get. They start facing a lot of problem. Now we are trying a model wherein whenever some product is being worked out on by a startup, we invite other startups to join that consortium. For example, today any hardware product will have a mechanical design, manufacturing, material science in it too, and also the electronics, software in it. So a lot of expertise has to come for that product to emerge. Why don't, in an ecosystem, if startup like Deshpande startup is there, why can't few startups together can work towards that product? That is something we are working at our university. At least 2 products we have a kind of a consortium formed where different technologies, we are seeing a better success here.
Thank you.
That's one of the...
Thank you. Yeah, Sudhir, you wanted to mention something.
Yeah, you know, this is. I'm just going to share at a micro level what some of the people in entrepreneurs are doing at the talent side. COVID was a big game changer. Work from home was a big game changer. And today, people have hired. I mean, in one of my companies, there was an engineer working in Ukraine, by the way. So I think what will happen is, what has happened already is that with the internet, you may want to think about saying, hey, it doesn't matter where the person is. And if you find somebody, you are based in, let's say, Hubli, and if the person is in Bangalore, how does it matter? And by the way, people are working 3 shifts a day right now, and people are, after 6 o'clock, they go and do something else. So at the end of the day, you can get the right talent, part-time or full-time, anywhere in the country. And if it is very high-end talent, maybe, 2 hours a week somewhere else in the US. I think it's worth talking about that because you need talent. You don't need those people to shift to Hubli. You have to dislocate and disconnect these two. And then many of our people are hiring people who are differently abled. Women want to stay back. In COVID, everybody wanted to go back home. And today I realized that many of our own VC employees don't want to come back to main cities. They want to stay back home. And to that extent, that's an opportunity. Let them stay back where they are overall. Outsource. One of our companies in services called XYBs, they actually are the marketplace for services, and they take projects and their people are based all over the country. So I think different models are something which is very, very important. On the hardware side, I just want to mention one thing. Incubators, accelerators, and something which Sandbox with Desh has set up there. Sandbox is very unique. Incubator accelerators were typically set up where there was industry already. But what happens is, if you want, let's say, hardware, you want a facility on micromotors, you have to go to Titan because they are good at micromotors, because they work in the aircraft industry as well as the watch industry. So maybe worthwhile for, let's say, a town like Hubli to go and say, hey, how can I get a hardware player which is large to come to Hubli and set up something small there? it is very important to get big guys into a small town. It can't be just entrepreneurs all the time. I mean, today, one of the cities in Pune, we're talking to people and saying, hey, why don't you get a first cry there, or a lens card there, or a Flipkart there, because they need logistics space. They have massive logistics space. That itself will churn people and churn knowledge and churn entrepreneurs in the swim city. So is it possible to get at a government and at a higher level that local entrepreneurs cannot do, to convince large industry to come to small towns? That itself will be a big motivator and a big catalyst for entrepreneurs to stay back there.
Thank you, Suresh. I think we really have an opportunity of becoming a strong hardware cluster for entrepreneurs. And how much time do we have? We're done. Yeah. So, well, on that note, I'm sure over lunch, we're going to have a lot more of opportunities for interaction. So, a big thank you to all the panelists. And I think the next takeaway is that this is a great opportunity for entrepreneurs from Bharath. There's a need for a new model. Sandboxes like this are a great place for a new model. And Desh needs to be sending more letters, emails, yes, to more universities for many more experiments to happen. So on that note, thank you very much for your time, and thanks. And thank you, Sudhir, for joining.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'd like to invite Mr. Vivek Pawar to please come up on the stage and honor the panelists. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for such an insightful session. Most of you in this room are entrepreneurs or have come across other entrepreneurs in one way or another. We know that the journey of each founder is unique. The reason for starting up, the trials and tribulations along the way. Every experience offers a learning opportunity, not just for one's own self, but also for others. While there are overlaps among most founders' journey, the Bharat-focused founders have their own challenges. This next panel brings together founders focused on the Bharat market to talk about their experiences building their respective ventures. So please put your hands together for our panelists, Dr. Sheetal, co-founder, Chief Growth Officer at S4S Technologies. Prasad Patil, founder and CEO at ISIL Technologies. Vikash Kumar Jha, founder and CEO at Rukart. And Manjunath Rao, co-founder and CEO at Public Next. Also, please join me in welcoming our panelist, our moderator, Manish Jaiswal, CEO at Kakatiya Sandbox.
Thanks, Piyush, for the introduction of the panelists. In the morning, we had Adil talk about the opportunities that are existing in Bharat. The panel that you were hearing a while ago, you also heard about the challenges that Bharat is currently facing. Despite all the odds, we now have 4 entrepreneurs here who have made it from Bharat. The knowledge about the success from Bharat have been so little. The documentation of the success story have been so little that if I go around this crowd and ask a dozen success stories to come from Bharat, many of you will be forced to think very, very hard. I am lucky that today morning I heard the word Nanopix, Safe Hands, and another startup that I am not able to recollect, but 3 good success stories from Bharat. But I don't think that is all that we have in India. I think there are many more. And So the aim of this panel is to really understand what made the startups here successful, what challenges did they face personally, and it's going to be in a story format where we really want to understand the personal inspiration, the challenges that they personally felt, and how did they overcome about it. The reason I feel this panel, when Arvind and Golden spoke to me about this panel, is very important is, first of all, the sheer amount of ignorance that we have about the Bharath, the word Bharath, what it means, the startups that are coming out of Bharath, what ecosystem constitutes Bharath, so on and so forth. Second, which I think in the morning got spoken about quite a bit, is the next big thing is going to come from Bharath. It's probably just round the corner. It's just waiting for its time to come. The revolution is right round the corner. And the third thing, which I think is equally important, and that makes this panel equally important, is the startups from Bharat are solving problems that matters to us. These are not solving problems that only a handful of population sitting in urban locations actually feel. These are problems of our neighborhood. These are problems with our healthcare system. These are problems of our agricultural farmers, and so on and so forth. So these are truly, truly important to us, and that's why I think we should be locked and attentive as to what all of these 4 startups have to say today. Yeah. So on that note, I want to first go around the panel and ask each one of you to tell us in a very, very simple language as to what do you do, what does a startup do. And please don't miss talking about the scale of your startup, because that's very important for all of us to know here. So we'll start with you, Manju. No, sorry, Prasad, yes. No, we'll start with Prasad and go around the corner, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Manish. At ICEL Technologies, we work with life sciences companies. So primarily, whenever any new drug or any new device has to come, for example, your COVID vaccine came out, and I'm not claiming that we worked on COVID vaccine, but any new drug that has to come to the market, a lot of research happens, a lot of regulatory and then approvals are required and things like that. So they need to find the most influential, the most experienced experts, which is the healthcare professionals, the life sciences companies, which are the pharma, biotech companies, have to find. So our platform, which is an enterprise SaaS product for life sciences companies, helps them identify the digital opinion leaders or the healthcare professionals or the experts, and then connects with them. So platform is used in over 20 countries right now, primarily the US and European markets where most of the medical research happens. That's what we do.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Sheetal Somani. I'm one of the co-founders at S4S Technologies. We work with the farmers, and our company is an agri-food sustainable technology platform where we provide the technology access to the farmers. They process their farm produce. We provide them the access to finance also, and finally we buy back the products whichever processed by the farmers at the farm gate. We connect the farmers to the market. So we create, capture and redistribute the value. Right now we are working in 120 villages in Maharashtra, working with more than 800 women farmers, and our daily processing capacity is 40,000 metric tons of fresh produce. Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Manjunath. I am a co-founder of Public Next. What we do is, if I ask you who is this president of US, you probably will say it's Joe Biden, right? If I ask you who is your area corporator, you wouldn't know. We connect Indian neighborhood. So someone sitting in Delhi is not going to solve the problem of Hubli or Rajajinagar or Koramangala. It has to be the people who are empowered enough, having a platform to express themselves, who are going to solve the problem. We try to build accountability in the system through Public Next. Today we have presence in 4 districts of Karnataka. We have 250,000 people using the platform, and they spend around 10 crore minutes in an annum in the platform.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Vikas Jha. I am founder CEO of Rukart. We develop green innovations for farmers having less than 1 hectare of land. We have developed Subucular, where you can store your food, fruits, vegetable, and flower for 5 to 7 days without electricity, without solar power, by just giving 20 liters of water. We are currently present in 8 states. Thank you.
Now, yes, I think a big round of applause for all of them for what they have done. Now, every startup has an inspiration, and sometimes that inspiration is directly fed by the founder themselves. When I spoke to all these four co-founders at the backstage, I realized that they have something very, very personal that motivated them to start what they're right now doing. So I want, Vikas, you to start and tell what is your personal story for Rukart.
So, I am a Bihari guy. I born and brought up in a very small village in Madhubani district of Bihar. We are three brothers, so we are mostly the marginal farmers. So my elder brother, when he passed +2, he has to migrate to Delhi to earn the cash income, because my grandfather was not looking that this agriculture is a good option for him. And we were just two-year gap between all the three of us. So I was very close associated with him. We were playing together and all. So when he moved to Delhi to earn cash income, I was very much weeping and all. And I decided that time that if I get some time, something to do in my life, I will make this farming economical benefit attractive, so that there will be no forced migration. And once I passed out from I was in IITB, I started working on that dream. And then when I passed out, I had some ideas and I was working on that. So in 2019, we set up the company called Rukart. Yeah, that is my story.
Very nice. Manju, I know you have a personal story which is very heartwarming, and that sort of forced you to start this accountability platform, Public Next. So can we hear it from you as to what led you to start this?
Sure. The belief that the demography that we have in India can be a disaster or a dividend based on how we use it. So that belief was there since 2010-11-ish. So 2012, I surrendered my green card, came out to India to do something in India which is much bigger than what has been done yet. But it is not on the accountability side. Then I did nothing. I worked for another product company and then spent another 3 years over there. A couple of life incidents happened which made me realize that there is a complete lack of accountability in the system. It's to do with the medical systems that we have here in India and maybe rest of the world as well. My mother was on the continuous steroid for 6 years. She had interstitial lung disease. And when you're on a continuous steroid, your bones become brittle, and then you have to be operated because bone starts breaking. She had to undergo a spinal surgery, and most of the doctors said her lungs are dying, and at this stage, spinal surgery is not a good option. One doctor who is studied in Singapore, is specialized in spinal surgery, said he will do it. He started the surgery, cut open the body, and then he realized that the implant that she already has in the body and the new implant that he has is not going to fit there. So he couldn't complete the surgery, he just stitched her body back and gave it to her. Right? So when we tried to ask people over there, there was a complete lack of even the guilt feeling or taking the accountability factor, right? We were very naive, we did nothing. We went to another hospital. But that is when this whole thinking about the problem of accountability started. And we said we had to fix it. But it's not only that story, we had a couple of more stories related to medical field. And the realization was that it is not that the problem is with the person or just one institution or the people. We are all like that. If we had to fix it, and we all want it to be fixed. So if you had to fix it, you just have to bring the people together into a common platform in the language that they understand. And the language in India is a local language and not English. Right? 300 million people prefer English, 1 billion people prefer local language. So if you had to bring that change and empower them, it has to be in the local language. And now we had this inflection point in 2016-15 time frame of geo-penetration, and then 9 out of 10 smartphones going to people who prefer local language and not English. So that was the right time to build this whole system. Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice. And Sheetal, you had a friend growing up with you with whom you started S4S. So how did it all start?
So actually, me and my other co-founder, who is the CEO, Vaibhav, we are together since we are in sixth standard of school. And during our final year of graduation, one fine day he said, I don't want to go for any job, and can we start something of our own? So I said, what can we start of our own? So he's like, we both have the science background, so can't we use our science knowledge for the betterment of society? Okay, fine, that sounds good, but what exactly we should do? And that's how we named our company. It's S4S, it's Science for Society. And we belong to a place which is a taluka place in Maharashtra, me and Vaibhav both. There is a weekly bazaar. If we want to buy the sabji, we need to go to that particular day to that particular bazaar and buy the vegetables. So in the morning time, the vegetables are good, and if we buy, for example, tomatoes 10 rupees a kg, the same tomatoes by 5 p.m. the farmer has to sell at 5 rupees a kg, and agar wo sale nahi hota hai, he has to throw the vegetables. He cannot take the vegetable back to his village. The transportation cost is involved. Again, these are the perishable products. Next day where he will sell the product. So we have seen that post-harvest losses, we can say, and that was something which was triggering, ki post-harvest losses are there. So it is just our village is facing the problem, only our farmers are facing the problem? No. Then we studied the India. So India is the second largest producer of fruits and vegetables in the world, and 30 to 40% of our produce is wasted, and most of it wasted at the farm level because of the perishable losses, handling losses. And we said, okay, fine, we'll work on increasing the shelf life of the product. So there are different ways of increasing the shelf life of the product. One can be the cold storage, keeping the products at the lower temperature. Other is the dehydration. Drying we know since ages. Our dadi, nani, they all used to do the dehydration. So what we are doing, which is something different. Then we studied, okay, there are different type of dryers which are already available in the market, and dehydration is already known by the people. There is a gap. No one has taken the dryers to the small and marginal farmers, and we did that. We developed a solar dryer which is developed for the small and marginal farmers, and we started working with the farmers. So that's how from the taluka level weekly bazaar to the dryers for the farmers, and now we are buying back the dehydrated products from the farmers and selling them again in the market. Thank you.
Yes, please. So there are two kind of startups that are coming from Bharat. One that wants to solve the problem of Bharat, and the other that are just about breaking this stereotype that startups from Bharat cannot handle the global market. They cannot be suppliers to global market. And I think that's where SL Technologies come in. So Prasad, tell me, what inspired you to come to a place like Hubli to start SL Technologies? What's your personal story of doing something? And I also want to understand what was your first success of breaking into international market with your product?
Well, what inspired me? Deshpande and Deshpande startups. Three of us started ISL. I used to work in another startup in Bangalore. And that's where I worked with a lot of life sciences companies, helping them solve problems around social media analytics and then, media analytics and things like that. And especially in this particular space, a lot of work used to happen manually. So Connector is the software platform that we created, and all three of us come from Hubli. So one used to work in Pune, I used to work in Bangalore, the other one used to work in Atlanta in Cork. And all the three of us come from Hubli. So that's where, we wanted to start in Hubli, because a lot of discussion, and let me digress a little bit here, and let me take this opportunity to talk about a lot of discussion from the morning is happening around the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 places and startups happening in tier 2. I think, we have gone past that stage where we need to be discussing about tier 1 and tier 2 and the place has become insignificant. COVID has done a lot of damage to the world, a lot of bad things, but it has done one good thing, which is it has put a San Francisco, a Boston, a London, a Bangalore, and a Hubli on the same level playing field, which is your desk, your headset, and your laptop. So, hybrid is the name of the game now. So, we are gone past the tier 1 and tier 2. So, we are sitting here. Can you imagine in our office, we have people sitting in Koppal, in Karwar, in Kumta, in places like this, and working with people in Berlin, in San Francisco, in Chicago, and so on. So, basically, we can build good startups from Hubli. And show me one place like this where we are sitting right now in Bangalore. Is there? No. So it's all a level playing field now. So that's what inspired us to come back to Hubli and start here.
Thanks, Prashad, for breaking that stereotype for all of us. Now, let's say a SaaS product company goes to a big company and sells a solution for managing their payroll or managing their insurance. And when you break that first deal, there is some amount of happiness that comes in. But for startups that are coming from Bharath, when they solve a problem, the amount of gratification they get is probably transmitted from a farmers being happy, right? Or from an issue of a local place getting highlighted to the government, and then government takes prompt action. So give me one instance where you directly saw your startup working, and it gave you that inspirational moment saying that, yes, this is why it started all the way, and this is why I put all the toil into the system. So maybe, Sheetal, you can take that question, and Manju, you as well. I mean, and others, please feel free to jump in for this question as well, yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I'll tell a small story. While working in Aurangabad, there is a women farmer called Prabhavati. We call her Prabhavati Tai. And in the initial days, when we went to like dryer installation and all, that time, these are the people who are not well connected to the market. And their land holding is also very small, that during some time they need to go to other villages for the farm related work. The dryers are installed, and she started processing the material, and after 1 month, 2 months, she was so nicely doing the work. And our model is, when we collect the material from the farmer, within 24 hours we do the payment. And one fine day she came with the mithai box, and I'm like, kya hua? So she is like, right now I have the money, which is my money, and I control how to spend that money. So अभी तक मेरी बेटी स्कूल नहीं जा रही थी. Now I am able to send my daughter also to the school, and I can spend the money on the health aspects or how to spend. When the male earns in the rural part, he decides how to spend the money. But when the women earns, the money goes for their upliftment. And that is one thing which is very satisfying. And right now we are working with 800 women micro-entrepreneurs. So, yes.
So what we basically do is we create authentic local content, right? And then there is a Twitter framework being built on top of it, where people can come together, build a community on local challenges, content, and then discuss about it. So very recently, 2020 May, the COVID time, here in Hubli, there is a large COVID isolation center was being built. It's huge. The facility was used. And the facility was not well maintained. They couldn't really use the facility. They couldn't use the restrooms, toilets, everything was bad. One of the patient over there, he happens to be user of Public Next. He posted a tweet. We call it as tweet, but we don't use the word tweet because it's a different platform, right? So he tweets in our platform saying that this is the challenge that I am facing with pictures. And we have local authorities also using the platform. So it goes to everyone, including the local authority. Office of DC calls the Taluka office. They fix the contractual issues with whoever the contractor who's supposed to clean it. Within 24 hours, the entire facility was cleaned. And it happened because we empowered someone to put the content in the platform, to express. And this is the accountability that we are talking about, right? And right now, the CET is happening in Karnataka. It's a common entrance test for engineering. It had one of the worst possible online system for getting the admission ticket. You can do the payment without filling the information. So the parents would think that they have done their job of filling the information, but they will not get the hall ticket. Many of the students did not get the hall ticket. So we made a story out of it. It is in Bangalore. So we made a story out of it in Bangalore. It went to the authorities. including the IAS officer who handles that department. And then within 2 days, they reopened the entire application to refill and they resubmit and get the hall ticket. Now the students are getting the hall tickets. And if you look at the platform today, it is still open for submission and then making the fixes. There are many such stories. There is a guy here, right here in Hubli, who has no legs. Sister is retarded. He was struggling to get food. Our reporter made a story of it. Within 2 weeks, 7.5 lakh was collected for him. Because people trusted the platform, there is a sense of belongingness to the stories. There is a authenticity and credibility associated with the content, and people act on the content within the platform and outside the platform.
So I'm going to take 3 things away from what all you said, and I think all the wannabe entrepreneurs in the crowd also possibly will take the same thing. First is, startups from Bharat have the potential to attain success and scale that we hear from all of them. Second, the kind of problem that they're trying to solve is immensely gratifying. Just look at the example that we just heard from Public Next, or the example that Science for Society just gave us. And the third one is, we don't have to be limited to Hubli, Dharwad, Belgaum region when you're doing a startup from here. Like ICL Technologies, we would actually be aiming for global markets where Japanese, US people can actually be our customers as well. So, these 3 takeaways I think is going to be for all the wannabe entrepreneurs. I think there's enough students as well at the back of the crowd, and this is for all of you. Now, let me ask a question from their side. When we have to find co-founders for a tech startup, normally we do use the word called co-founder dating. We normally find co-founders at either a Thai meeting or some success parties of a startup fundraise, or head start, something like that. But startups from Bharat, where do they get their co-founders? That's a question I want to ask all of you. Anybody can take that.
So I met Vishal, he's right here. Vishal 6 years back through a common friend. We used to work in a product company, and then I met Vishal, who we were looking for a guy who can build the product for us, right? And we met in MG Road in a coffee shop. Vishal was sold with the idea. The reason is Vishal comes from a small town in Gujarat, Surendranagar, where the entire community comes together to watch that 9 o'clock news, which talks about their district, right? And the entire community was sitting for that cable TV. So the connection to the problem statement was immediate. There was nothing to sell once we said it. Since then, we are associated. He takes care of the entire technology. Raghavendra is another co-founder. He's there. So he happens to be my brother as well. So we had a similar story. There was nothing to sell to him. So we are we are a partner in crime since then.
Yeah. So we are 3 co-founders in Rukat. I and Sarju were batchmate at IITB, and Gunwanti is about 18 years senior to me from IIT. But he was in foreign and all. He came back to India, working with IITB one project. So it took around 2 months to convince him to join the Rukat, because our solutions were not the conventional solutions, not electricity, no solar. So he was very much initially doubting, but somehow I was able to convince him, and since then he is with us.
For us, it's always during our education, like me and Vaibhav, we are together since school's 5th, 6th standard, and then other co-founders we found in our graduation. We think the energy level and the vibe should match, and in the co-founding team, the co-founders should complement each other. And when we are friends, we are studying together, we know each other very in a better manner, and that's how we found our team.
So we are 3 co-founders. Mahesh, he used to work as a chief architect at a company called Saibage in Pune. And Mahesh comes from Hubli as well. So it was easy to convince Mahesh. It took me a little while to get him to relocate to Hubli, but yes, I was able to do that. And Suraj, he's our CTO. He used to work at Coca-Cola in Atlanta, and I was visiting Atlanta at that time for a customer meeting. So I said, why don't you come by and then stay at our place? His wife cooked a nice meal for me, And then over the meal, she happened to say that he really wants to go back to India. Why don't you convince him to stay back in the US? So I did the exact opposite. I convinced him to relocate to Hubli. His wife at that time probably hated me for doing that. Hopefully she's moved beyond that now. So basically, he had to move back. So we used to talk about doing a startup all the time. It was only a question of idea, and that's how we moved to Hubli. Yeah.
So will it be right if I say that each one of you knew your co-founders before you started the startup, much before? It was not a date, right?
I believe it works best if it is like that, because you know each other's strengths. You know it's very important for co-founders to be absolutely rock solid with each other. Yeah.
And that's one thing I would like all of us to take, because startups from Bharat, the co-founders are really, really embedded into each other. Either they have same amount of connectedness to the problem, they come from the same region, all of them understand the problem at the same level, and I think that's what binds the success stories together whenever a Bharat startup was successful. So now I'm going to do a time check as to how much time we have got. Depending on that, we will take it forward. 10 more minutes? Sure. So then I think we can do two things. One is I want to ask each one of you, what is the strength of being a Bharat startup? And also, what are the losses that you incur on a daily basis being a Bharat startup? And sort of take time to expound upon each of the problems that you feel are very pertinent to your startup.
So, in our case, as a Bharat startup, we are working in Aurangabad, in and around Aurangabad, and our solution is for the farmers, and we also belong to that community. And that is the real strength, because we understand the people, we understand their problem. And once upon a time, like one of my mentors told me कि ड्रायर बना के बॉम्बे में बैठ के क्या करोगे? ड्रायर तो फार्मर्स को देना है, उसके घर पे जाके 2 दिन रहो तो पता चलेगा कि वो यूज कर रहा है नहीं कर रहा है, and what are the problems. And that is real. If we are developing certain solutions for customers, I'm calling them customers also here, but we need to be close to them to understand their ecosystem, and then only the business model will be fit. So that is a real advantage and strength. And I cannot call it as a disadvantage, but when we started in 2013, the ecosystem or the sandbox or these type of incubators, they were not there in the tier 2 or tier 3 cities. They are just, IIM Ahmedabad is carrying some incubation program, IIMB is carrying some incubation program, IIT Bombay is having certain programs, but the tier 2 and tier 3 cities, these people, their students or anyone, they also want to do something. So such ecosystems were missing, but right now I cannot say these are missing. Thank you.
In terms of advantages, so basically we are a bootstrap company. So there is not a lot of pressure in terms of, since we are servicing global customers, if we had started in, let's say, say Bay Area or some other place, there would have been a lot of pressure in terms of, sales, right? So that way we are a lot more comfortable operating out of Hubli. In terms of cost, there is not a lot of pressure and things like that. On the other hand, the flip side of it is also the challenge of selling to global companies sitting out of here, right? So it's fairly challenging. So we used to travel very often, but even then, if you don't have a local partner, companies are a lot more comfortable. At least used to be. Slowly, it is all changing now post-COVID. But they used to be a lot more comfortable working with a local presence as compared to a completely offshore company, right? We're a product company. Even then, they would be comfortable. So that way, sales is a little bit challenging, and on a lighter side, staying up late nights. Our sales head is here, my other partner. I had to keep him awake all night, and then, he curses me for that all the time. So, yeah.
I would just like to add one point. Like when we are working from Aurangabad, so the cost, there is a humongous pressure on the startups, on the operating cost and the time also. So when we shift from Mumbai to Aurangabad or any metro city to the internal tier 2 city, the costs are really low. That is the added advantage, because every penny saved is considered as your profit. Second thing is the logistic time. We cannot say कि मैं 1.5 घंटा local में travel कर रही हूँ to reach my office. So everyone is well connected in the same geography, and logistic time and the operational cost, these are also two added benefits while working internally.
So in Aurangabad, you can't say that we are late in the meeting for traffic.
No, everywhere. Wherever you want to go, 10 minutes.
That's a big advantage.
Yeah.
For us, I don't know the definition of Bharat market, right? So I always get confused. For us, the real the advantage was being incubated in an ecosystem who had a different kind of a thinking than typically what you would see outside. The Deshpande startups. Typically, you see that as a company, you had to establish product market fitment and then just do a crazy scaling and then think about a business model much later. But this is the ecosystem which believes that you have to do a proper danda, right? You have to, if you have a PMF, product market fitment, make sure that people are willing to pay for that. So it made us build a model where not only that we have a PMF, but also a stronger business model and a proven unit economics. This especially helps given the fact that we are going through a funding winter season now. And having a stronger business model will sustain operations for a longer time. That's the advantage. Now the disadvantage is, again, nothing to do with the Bharat market as such, but with the narrative. If you're looking for a funding angle, VCs need a narrative from China or US before they take a bigger bet. You wouldn't easily see a completely new narrative coming out of India becoming a big scale, right? You may have a VC from San Francisco sitting here, but he's still in San Francisco in his mind. So it's kind of hard. You had to prove this model to multiple other locations before you get that visibility.
So the first advantage, I think that from being a Bharat age, I can follow my passion. That is the first advantage. I don't have any pressure, family pressure, parents pressure, ye karna hai, wo karna hai, kuch bhi nahi. They all just believe in me. That is the first, I think so. Second, I can run the company initially the way I want. That is the profit margin I am talking about now. Since we are the bootstrap, so many people told us that profit margin itna hona chahiye, ye itna hona chahiye. I don't believe in that. Whatever I feel that farmers should pay and we can sustain, that is the profit margin I kept it. So we are also just in the funding round and now the people believe in. So we are just about to get some funding and all. That is I think that the advantage. In the disadvantage side, the first one, getting the right talent. If I get somebody from IIT or good MBA college, he or she know his job. And he will done within the timeline. But for getting the same job done by, from somebody who is from the block level of office, from a district level, is taking a lot of time to motivate him, to tell him that you have to complete on the timeline, given timeline. That takes a lot of time, and sometimes it frustrates me particularly. But I think that in the morning, just before the session, Gururaj sir has mentioned that you have to build up the talent. I think that could be the answer one. The second, I think that monitoring is a little bit difficult for us. So whatever the subject we are installing, we are doing the periodically monitoring. But some of our technology is very remote village where there is no internet even. So monitoring takes a lot of cost. So around our 30% of cost going to monitoring only. So I think that is a big disadvantage currently we are seeing. Yeah.
So systematically saying Bharat as a market has its own advantages and disadvantages. If you talk about advantages, low cost to acquire customers, low operations cost, you can never be late for meetings. But there are systematic disadvantages as well, which is probably funding. As you said, the quality of the talent, the amount of investment that you have to make to monitor your operations and so on and so forth. Now I'll pause here and see if there are any questions from the audience for any of the panelists today. And then we can call this panel off. And of course, feel free to catch them during the lunchtime. We have one question from there. Can you get the mic there, please?
Thank you. I'm Umesh. I had a quick question for people who are building something. You know, you build a cooler for vegetables or you build a dryer or something. You need the materials to build them. You need the resources, maybe a laser cutter or whatever. You still have to go to cities at that level, probably. How do you see that? Is that an issue for you people because you have to source your materials, manufacture them somewhere, and then you bring them to the villages? Do you feel that's a challenge?
Initially it was, but in the team itself, like the founding team, our team is, one is mechanical engineer, one is polymer engineer, one is chemical engineer, one is food technologist. So designing the part was not an issue. We have the patent, so the product is designed by our team. Manufacturing, there are good manufacturing setups also in the tier 2 and tier 3 cities. Just we need to sit with them and get the product done. And if it is near to the field, because I cannot make something in Mumbai or the Bhiwandi, MIDC and take it to Aurangabad. So we identified the manufacturer in the surrounding areas who are now manufacturing the dryers for us.
So once your supply chain is established, you're happy, it works okay, and
Yes.
you don't have to worry about
Yes.
it. Thank you.
For us, I think little bit problematic right now because transportation costs are little bit on the higher side. But I think with the scale, we are able to lower down the transportation cost.
So I'm sure there are many more questions, but we'll probably break for lunch. And please feel free to catch all the panelists there during the lunchtime. Thank you so much for being patiently listening to all the viewpoints here, and thanks all the panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, all the panelists. I'd like to invite Nyanada to honor the panelists, please.